Welcome to the official Lawyer Minds podcast. Lawyer Minds is an ever-growing ecosystem for all the resources modern lawyers need. As the official Lawyer Minds podcast, we'll discuss everything from the latest happenings on the website to industry news. Get ready. Here we go. It's time to dive into the minds of successful lawyers. Here are your hosts, Tad Thomas and Mike Campbell.
Mike, what's been going on?
Not much, brother. How about yourself?
Another 2 weeks down. It's funny. If you had told me 3 months ago or 4 months ago that the whole world was going to shut down, there would be no trials, I wouldn't be traveling, half my depositions, at least at the beginning of COVID, would have gotten canceled. I'd been like, what am I going to do? I'm going to sit here with my thumbs, twiddling my thumbs. But, in the middle of all this, we just decided to launch this new website and get on this new project, launch a podcast, so it's been a little busy the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I've been sort of a ball of stress. I'm not going to lie. I had my first in-person hearing yesterday at court. And apparently they forgot to tell you during the pandemic that elves break into closets and slim down the size of sweat or slacks. Because when I put mine on yesterday, they did not fit. They did not. This is like 3 months since I've worn these things. So I don't know what's going on. And also fatigue. I was fatigued yesterday. I was just dead tired after being there for an hour. So
yeah,
find those elves, and I got to build up some mental resilience here, man.
You got the COVID 15 instead of the freshman 15, right?
I'm telling you, man, at least that. It's not good.
Yeah. Well, there's, some good things to look forward to. We got AAJ amped up coming up, and we got a really good interview today with Tobi Millrood, who is the incoming president, and he's currently president-elect. Will be moving up to president of AAJ at Amped Up.
And that's happening at the convention,
yep.
Which we had a podcast, very first podcast with Colleen, talked about it. Tad, do you remember your first convention?
I do. My first convention was 2005 in Toronto, Canada. And I walk in, and I was a young lawyer at the time. I graduated from law school in 2000. I walked in on Friday night to the new lawyers division reception. And since I was a new lawyer at the time, and walk in the door, and the first two people I met were Elise Sanguinetti, who just is now the past president of AAJ, and Chris Gilreath, who is what we call legacy. His dad was AAJ, Chris is AAJ. And those were the first two people I met, and they just kind of welcomed me to the organization, and that was all she wrote.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I'm sure that you probably just stuck around the conference center the whole time, right?
Yeah, kind of. I remember because it was Toronto, I found a cigar shop about a block and a half away that sold Cuban cigars. And it also happened to have a secret door to a speakeasy bar that had some good Kentucky bourbon in Toronto. And
you didn't go back there, though. You were busy learning and getting education at the conference.
Until the last day. And the last day, I remembered when I flew into Toronto, I was reading, and I can't remember if it was SARS or hay fever, whatever the pandemic was in 2005. I remember reading that if you go to the airport and you have a fever, they're not going to let you on the plane. Well, my flight was at like 2:00 or 3:00. Well, for lunch, I went to this establishment and had 2 Cuban cigars and 3 or 4 bourbons. And by the time I got into the cab, I was sweating profusely, and I was terrified that they weren't going to let me on the plane to get back home. So I've got the cab, I'm like, crank up the air. I'm like moving my face over to get in front of the air vents and just praying that they're going to let me on the plane. So, yeah. It was a great experience, though, and that was all she wrote. I haven't missed too many conventions since then.
And now you just call 2 Cubans and 3 bourbons a Thursday afternoon. Is that right?
Well, yeah, Thursday afternoon or breakfast, something like that.
Thursday morning or Wednesday afternoon.
Depends on the day of the week.
Yeah.
But I'm excited about having Tobi on today to talk about his year coming up as president of AAJ. You know, Tobi's just been such a leader. You know, you can't even say that you only have a year to influence the organization, because in Tobi's case, that hasn't been true. He's been such a huge influence on the organization even before he was an officer. It's, you know, his big thing has always been products and services. And what does our organization offer to the average Main Street lawyer? And he's a mass tort lawyer, but he's really focused his efforts on Main Street lawyers that do car wrecks and premises cases and things like that. So I'm really looking forward to see what his goals are for the year.
Just an outstanding person. Tobi's just an outstanding person, and I having that background on him makes so much sense, and I'm excited to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, and like you mentioned too, you know, he's got a great personal story, you know, and tragic personal story that I think makes the timing of his presidency even more important.
Yeah, he has a unique opportunity to give voice to a very, like you said, tragic situation, and put a person to the just countless number of people we've lost during this crisis, and how some industries are doing everything they can to prevent people like Tobi and his family from seeking justice or holding the people accountable for what happened to them, you know, in a court of law.
Which, you know, preventing that, you know, preventing big business from getting that immunity is one of the three pillars of AAJ, making sure that the courthouse doors are open. So,
you know, and this is maybe the cynical, no, it's not the cynical view. It is the realistic view of having done this, and you know this too, Tad. It is just an opportunity for some of these industries who are not like the small family-run businesses that you and I may have grown up with. These are industries that will take advantage of this situation and not having prepared for it, and then try to bend the rules while the game is being played. And so it doesn't just affect the individuals who are harmed, it also affects the family businesses who are trying to play by the rules, and it elevates the playing field for those who don't. And so I'm just really grateful that Tobi shared his story, and he has a platform now to go out there and a bully pulpit to share it.
Yeah. So let's hear from Tobi Millrood. Tobi, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Introduce yourself a little bit to everybody. You're a plaintiff's lawyer in Philadelphia. Talk about your practice.
Thanks, Tad. My name is Tobi Millrood. I'm at Pogust Millrood in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Our practice is a plaintiff's complex personal injury practice. We center a lot on medical device and drug litigation, what a lot of people call mass tort litigation. But we have a practice that concentrates heavily also in class action litigation and complex personal injury, ranging from slip and falls to car wrecks to medical malpractice. We do it all. Very proud of our firm. We have about 16 folks in our office just outside of Philadelphia, and it's a great group.
You know, I've had the privilege of serving with you as an officer in AAJ for the last several years, and I think everybody's got a story about how they started in AAJ and the role that that's played in their practice and the development of their practice. Talk to us a little bit about how you got started in AAJ.
Yeah, so I was doing one of my earliest drug cases called Baycol. It was a cholesterol-lowering drug against the defendant Bear, and because Bear was the defendant, it allowed us to be in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania as one of the locations of the litigation. And I started working on the litigation and had heard that AAJ was a great place to network, find other folks that you might be able to collaborate with. So I headed down to a conference. It was the Winter Convention in Miami, and a friend who's now a very close friend. I didn't know him then, but a friend walked up to me and he said, "Oh, I saw you in that Bay Call meeting. Where are you doing your cases?" The choice at that time was Philadelphia or the MDL in Minnesota. And I said, "Well, I'm from Philadelphia, so I'm doing the cases there." And he said, "Oh, well, I'd rather have my cases in state court. Would you have any interest in being my local counsel?" I didn't even really know at that point what it meant in a mass tort case to be local counsel. By the end of that AAJ conference, I was local counsel for about 10 firms. And I understood that that could be a calling card, that with the Bay Call litigation in Philadelphia, I could serve as local counsel. And I understood right there the power of networking that AAJ had, and everything else followed from there.
You know, it's amazing. You get to convention and how much the networking really turns into business. It's, you know, that wasn't the reason I went initially. The reason I went was just to get out of the house, frankly. Yeah. And then I got to see, you know, what all there was. But, you know, even, you know, coming from Louisville, Kentucky, there's so many lawyers, once you get in this national atmosphere, they're looking for local counsel or have a case to refer. It really is a great part of the organization. So talk to us about, you know, in this July at the Amped Up convention, you're moving up to president of the organization. And I know that you've probably spent the last several months planning for your year. Kind of talk us through, you know, what the last 6 months or so have been like as president-elect.
It's been amazing. It's actually been really an incredible labor of love. This is, for me, in terms of leadership and leading the largest trial lawyers organization in the world, you cannot go coach a Super Bowl and be unprepared. You've got to have a playbook. You got to know the offense, the defense, the special teams, all the contingencies that could happen. And so I've been just rolling up my sleeves to understand every single kind of nook and cranny of the organization that I will lead. I want to understand the very details of all of our member groups, all of our committees, our budget, all of the process of the finances, and what it will take for me to effectively lead. And of course, no coach can win a championship, lead to great success without assembling a great team around her or him. And so for me, the other thing that I have had to do is I get the privilege of appointing folks to committees. And a lot of folks serve on committees at the preference of the president, at the appointment of the president. So for me, I've taken that very kind of personally, that I want to look at each and every single slot to make sure that if I get 1 year to run this organization as well as I possibly can, I want to assemble the best coaching staff around me, the best players around me, and put the best possible team on the field. And so I'm reaching out to people and I'm saying, I don't just want to appoint you for this year, but I need your commitment. I need to know that you're going to roll up your sleeves. I need to know that you're going to think outside the box. I need to know that you're not just going to punt on this one, that you're really going to help me perform, because your victory is going to be my victory, and my victory is going to be your victory. And so a lot of that has been what I've been doing for the last several months, is just assembling that team and putting the game plan in action.
So Tobi, real quickly, I know Tad said that he just wanted to get out of the house and that's why he joined AAJ. And I guess since joining AAJ, other than this 3 months of the pandemic, I don't know that Tad's actually been in his house, because he travels so much. And I know that the same is for you, because working your way up to president is not just a 1 year thing. I mean, this is a decade-long commitment. And how is it that how do you perform at your job, perform in your life personally, and then also meet all the obligations with AAJ?
Yeah, my wife would say I no longer use recipes to cook. I just basically at this point, you got to be able to know how to multitask. You can't worry about whether you've measured exactly a quarter cup of oil and a half a cup of flour. You just kind of start throwing things. And I think there's no question there's been trial and error along the way. But I think at the end of the day, it's really been about learning how to multitask learning to have some great people around you, both at AAJ, my fellow officers, my fellow executive committee, but also inside my own office, my fellow attorneys and my support staff. I wouldn't be able to do all this without being able to effectively delegate to those folks and then carry it out. So it's a combination of multitasking and delegating to folks who have really been supportive along the way, not to mention, of course, my own home where my wife and 3 kids have really allowed me to pursue this passion of mine. They know that it's my passion that I really want to do. And I think it gives them fulfillment to see that I get so thrilled by it.
What are some of your goals for the next year?
So I went to school at Tulane University, and I was a communications major. And particularly, I was a rhetoric communication major, which kind of set me on a collision course to being a lawyer. But for me, communicating is the heart and soul of effective organizations, effective leadership. And communication comes in so many facets. So it could be our internal communication for how we communicate with our own members and how we get them engaged, how we communicate with our own board and empower them and give them a voice. It could be our external communications, such as our website or our own organization's podcast, or how we communicate to the public at large to make them understand just the role that trial lawyers play in our community. So there, almost every facet of what I'm going to be trying to do is to build on and even improve every aspect of communications that I can. A couple of specific items are that I think we have a great committee within our organization called Trial Lawyers Care. And Trial Lawyers Care often comes to incredible rescue at the time of natural disaster, like a hurricane or a tornado or something like that. We also have our Trial Lawyers Care help come in just before a convention and maybe help rehab a house or something like that. But the reality is that 365, 24/7, an organization made up of 20,000 members has within it people who are doing caring things every single day. I have friends right now that are serving on the front lines while they're a trial lawyer. They're also serving as an EMT, taking care of people during this coronavirus pandemic in one of the epicenters in northern New Jersey, where there's more cases than anywhere else. And that friend of mine, he puts his life on the line every single week. Instead of just being an affluent, very effective lawyer, he says, I'm going to take some risk and help my community and help people recover and help people get through this and make sure that people are cared for. I'm going to volunteer as an EMT. That's an incredible thing that he's doing for his community. So those stories need to be told. So, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to tell the great stories of trial lawyers. We're going to use effective communications. My hope is that we roll out that communications story in a much broader, polished, hopefully audio or video or web video, so that the public really understands just how much it is that we help society at large.
Tobi, real quickly, I love this approach, and the reason why is because a few years ago I decided that it was important to put a face on the harm that a bad product can have on a family, and that was my family. We lost my dad because of a product that should never have been in the stream of commerce. You have graciously shared a story of how your family has been harmed during this COVID pandemic. Could you talk a little bit about your motivation for sharing that and give us some background?
Sure. So on April 22nd of this year, I lost my mom to COVID. My mom was living in a nursing home and was doing pretty well for 82 years old. Before the pandemic, there was, within the wing of the facility that she lived in, there was a kind of creative center where patients could come in, they could draw, they could paint, they could do whatever. And she was in there every single day, really up until the pandemic. She was an incredibly creative woman. My mom raised 7 kids. She had twins at the age of 20 and had her last child, my younger sister, when she was 40. So there's a 20-year span of all my siblings. And for all of those years, from the time she had her first twins, my older brothers, till the time she had my younger sister, and then all the way up through until the time we left for college and onto our careers, all she knew how to do was us selflessly and unconditionally love me and my siblings. But beyond that, she was an incredible, just incredible community leader in a lot of ways. She did a lot of outreach to come out to schools and teach. I lived in an area that didn't have a lot of people of my faith. I'm Jewish, and the area that I grew up in, when I grew up, there weren't many Jewish kids that were living in that area. It's different now, but it wasn't about going and trying to convert or proselytize kids so that they would become Jewish. She just wanted people to understand that there's a different side of the world and that we all come from different places and you need to respect one another. And so she would come into the school and she would teach the kids about what's important to our faith, like holidays like Hanukkah and Passover. And the kids loved my mom. And then later on, she started doing all kinds of dressmaking, not just for my own family, for my sisters and my sister-in-laws when they got married, but for a good percentage of my class at their prom. You know, they were wearing my mom's dresses, and people who were just going to work in the area, they would come to my mom to make their wardrobe for her. Her tentacles, she reached out to so many incredible people. And I think about not just my mom, but particularly the generation that she was raised in. A lot of people have called the greatest generation, the people who were raised during World War II and made so many sacrifices. My mom could have gone to college, but the oldest of 3 kids, once she started a semester at Temple University, her parents said, "We need you to come home. We need you to help out your siblings, and we need you to help out." And she forfeited that opportunity so that she could care for others. And when you think about that generation, how when they get older, they can no longer care for themselves, and for whatever reason, their family doesn't have the wherewithal to watch them on a daily basis. We have to be able to love that generation enough that we can safely put them in a place where they can be cared for, watched over, and protected. And my mom went to a place that, particularly the wing that she was in at that nursing home, did not have that care, did not have that protection. And, you know, I've gone through a lot of stages of grief, and I know that there's a lot of stages of them, but right now I remain pretty angry about this, in particular because now there's an effort, not just it's bad enough that that my mom's nursing home, but other nursing homes haven't been transparent about some of these facts and what was going on. But beyond that, although they did not protect my mom and others that lived in that facility with her, where dozens of people either were infected or died from COVID, not only did they not protect them and did they not protect my mom, now they want protection from being held accountable. And honestly, that sickens me. It really does. I just think that there is no greater dishonor and disregard for that generation that made sacrifice than to come and say, we don't want to be held accountable. We don't want to be held responsible. And, you know, I wrote that op-ed to the New York Times because I felt strongly about it. And when I put it together, one of the questions that was asked of me was, I know that you say in your op-ed that they should have been prepared for this and this was preventable. Do you really mean that? I mean, did anybody really know that COVID-19 was coming? My answer was, well, we didn't know that COVID-19 was coming. How many times do we hear from leaders in this country make accusations that, oh, we didn't do well before on this because we had the swine flu and we had H1N1 and we had Ebola and we had these things. We have had pandemics before. They've never reached our shores to this regard, but there were so many warning signs that this was coming. And instead of stocking the basements of these nursing homes with PPE and gowns and masks and other protections, they were stocking their pockets with profits with these for-profit corporations, and it makes me sick. It just does. So if I sound a little angry, a little bitter over it, I am, because I know that we could. I'll just wrap up with this. The pandemic has made a lot of us a little stir crazy and find things to do that'll keep them. And kind of in a little bit of dedication to my mom, who was such an incredible woman in the kitchen, I decided to take a shot at making sourdough bread. And I failed in the first 2 to 3 weeks. I just could not get it going. I could not get what you needed to get going. And one day I just kind of fell apart, and I realized that I could not pick up the phone and just call my mom and say, how do I get past this hurdle? I cannot get past this one step that you need to. And I can't do that anymore. And it's really just because of carelessness, recklessness, selfishness that were all the things that my mom wasn't. So that's where I am. And I'm glad I have a platform at AAJ, being president-elect now, where if I talk about that, people will listen. And I realized that my mom would want me to use that platform the same way she just used her platform as a Jewish woman that wanted to tell people about what different faiths were like. When you have a platform, use it. So that's what I did.
It's funny how much in life is about timing, and how, whether you want to say everything happens for a reason or whatnot, but, you've suffered a very personal loss, and the backdrop of that loss is big business, and in this case, nursing homes out there asking Congress for protections. And what better position for you to be in at this particular time and over this next year than, the president of an organization that addresses this issue every day. So I imagine one of the things that's probably even more pronounced for you now is your role as the leader of AAJ in advocating for our clients.
Yeah. I don't think we appreciate, outside of what we do as lawyers, until we really go in and we talk to our clients and we hear the problems in society, how many voiceless people there are. And to be able to give a voice to the voiceless is one of the most fulfilling things you can do in life, because it's not that they won't speak for themselves. It's just they don't have the platform. They don't have the same thing. They can pick up the phone and they can call their congressman, and the likelihood that they'll get a call back or a letter back, it's at best they're going to get a form letter or a staffer that says go away. But they can call me, their lawyer, and I can say, I'm going to help you, not just as your lawyer, but because I have this platform, like you said, Tad, as president-elect of AAJ, now president of AAJ, where they're going to have to listen to me, because that's how powerful our organization is.
And I think it's one thing to say, 100,000 people died during this pandemic, but then you think about each person and you find out about the individual stories behind the loss, and knowing who your mom was. And thank you for sharing that with us. But giving those people the voice and the families the voice is such a powerful opportunity for you right now.
Yeah, I hope you got a chance to see, and everyone gets a chance to see, when the New York Times ran that special edition, exactly what you're talking about, Mike, with when we got up to 100,000, they just ran 1,000 of the 100,000 on the front page, every single name. And in the digital edition, you could hover over those and hear a little bit about those stories, because you're right, they're not just a number or statistic, they're a real person with a real story.
One thing I'm looking forward to, Toby, is celebrating you coming in as president. And I know AAJ convention is not going to be our typical convention this year, but talk to us a little bit about Amped Up and how are we going to be able to celebrate you and your coming in as president?
Well, talking about my mom, I definitely got the creative gene from my mom. And so I really appreciate that when you're stuck with limitations, how you can think of creative ways to expand what those limits are. And AAJ is doing something that's pretty amazing for this Amped Up convention. We're meeting July 13th through 15th, and it's not just going to be your average get in front of your computer and go to a couple of Zoom meetings. We're going to offer 150 hours of CLE. We're going to offer networking experiences. We're going to be offering opportunities for bourbon tasting and other social events where lawyers can network. We're going to have opportunities where lawyers can kind of get into breakout rooms and meet with new lawyers the same way they would meet. Obviously, there's no perfect substitute for face-to-face, the way I was meeting at my first convention, but there's still going to be plenty of opportunities for networking and knowledge and community, which is what AAJ is great at, and Amped Up is still going to supply that in a very creative platform. I'm pretty excited about that. And, look, we have to learn, and I don't think it will be very hard for trial lawyers given the people that we represent. We have to learn that sometimes that to get something good in life, you still have to make some sacrifice. So I understand that, look, given some of the things that we want to achieve political changes, civil justice improvements, changing the White House in November. I'd much rather give up a face-to-face convention if it means that we can still go forward and make all the efforts that we can to bring about change. So it's okay. This too shall pass, one day at a time. And I think the Amped Up convention experience is going to be an incredible experience for people to attend.
Well, one thing, when we're in person and they're doing the officer speeches and the introductions and everything, I feel like it's inappropriate to walk in with a bourbon in my hand. Mm-hmm. But I think that because it's amped up and it's virtual and I can sit here at my computer and watch you give your speech, I'll have less problem toasting you immediately with a good Kentucky bourbon.
Well, I'll tell my kids that Tad drinks his apple juice looking just a little bit different.
That's right. It's Coke. It's just not fizzy.
Yeah.
Toby, thanks so much for being on. I really appreciate it. Look forward to your year as president of AAJ, and I hope to get you back on in a year to talk about all the things that you accomplished over the year. And obviously, I'm here for you to help you in any way I can, and look forward to it.
Thanks, Tad. Thanks, Mike. It's great to be with you guys, and it's great that you guys are doing this. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Toby.
All right, guys.
What'd you think?
I mean, an incredible story. I don't know how someone can listen to what Toby had to say about losing his mom and not feel it in their bones. And then also knowing that he's got this incredible opportunity to share that story. And there's 100,000 of them just like his.
Yeah, I want to make sure that, in the podcast notes and the show notes, we include a link to his op-ed that ran because it was so timely and so personal. AAJ's three pillars, community, education, and advocacy. And so, one of the three most important things that the organization does is fighting for families who, have had these kinds of tragedies. And when you have big business and big insurance and corporations out there trying to say, we shouldn't be sued over this, even though totally dropped the ball. Toby mentioned, some people said, well, we didn't know it was coming. That's just so not true. Federal law requires these companies, these nursing homes, to have, plans in effect to make sure that you prevent things like this. And so many of them across the country have just dropped the ball.
And the thing is that a bunch of them didn't. And what's
Right.
frustrating is that the ones who did everything right and played by the same rules that were supposed to be in effect for everyone else, people did follow the federal family businesses and some other companies did follow by those rules. And now it's like, hey, you know what? Thanks for playing by the rules, but we're going to make sure that the people who didn't, or the companies who didn't, get special favor.
Right.
That's first of all, that's not capitalism. But
Yeah.
second of all, granting immunity to these nursing home these nursing homes and these businesses, what the legislature and the government is effectively saying is, we don't trust 12 people to come in and say, we think that they made a mistake, or we don't think that they made a mistake, and making the best decision for the community that they can.
Yeah.
So Tobi has every right to be upset. I know I'm frustrated. I know you're frustrated, and I know AAJ is filled with people who are leading the charge on fighting this.
Tobi was always going to be a spectacular president anyway, but I think in light of what happened, I think the torch is going to burn even brighter, and he's going to make it personal, fighting for, all of the clients that AAJ has to fight for. And one thing, we really don't get into politics much in this podcast, and Republican or Democrat, I don't care. But when it comes to stuff like this, it always astonishes me that one particular party wants to protect big business, but then they, on the flip side of the coin, they talk about free market economy, and they want legislation to protect companies from being sued, but then they don't want legislation that keeps big business from being discriminatory against minorities.
That's right.
I don't understand how you can be so hypocritical. So
you see it look, you're involved with the Capitol. You see it every day. I see it down at the Capitol here in Missouri. I mean, it is what's good for the goose, as it turns out, isn't good for the gander. I mean, if you got the right amount of money and the right amount of influence, you can get the rules bent to your advantage. And again, that's we're not going to get into politics, but when we're talking about the smallest form of government, which is what I think most principled conservatives would live by, that's a jury. That's 12 people from the community coming in to make a decision. When we're talking about the Constitution, we're talking about the Bill of Rights and the Seventh Amendment, and the ability, and most state constitutions have that in there, that the right to a jury trial shall not be infringed. And so, and again, free market economy, allowing everyone to play by the same set of rules. That's just, I don't understand why you'd want to bend them one way or another.
Well, I'm happy to be part of an organization that's out there fighting, for equality. And so that, when you step through as a trial lawyer, when you step through the courthouse door, and you have 12 people sitting there and making a judgment on a dispute between two parties, it doesn't matter if on one side you have a billion-dollar corporation, on the other side you have a poor family who can't even afford a lawyer. If the rules are enforced appropriately, and we talked about the civil rules with Kaz last week, if it's a level playing field, it doesn't matter, the wealth on either side.
That's right.
And it's nice to be part of a group that fights for that.
Lady Justice is blind. I mean, it's a pillar of our government, of our society, to just make sure that if you walk into a courtroom, justice is supposed to be blind. And that's in the criminal justice system and in the civil justice system. And so if you're listening to this and you're not a part of one of these organizations, obviously we have an affinity for specific ones like American Association of Justice. I know you've got is it Kentucky Association of Justice, or
AAJ,
AAJ, and then Missouri Association of Trial Attorneys. Your state trial bars and your national trial associations like AAJ are making sure that the courthouse doors stay open for your clients. And if you take anything from this podcast, it would be, could you help us? And it might not be money. It just might be your time.
Well, and we got coming up, and if people haven't gone back to watch the first episode, when we interviewed Colleen talking about AAJ Amped Up, we've got that coming up still, and there's still time to register. And, it's a great place to commiserate, with other like-minded trial lawyers that are there, to develop skills to be better advocates. So, I'm really looking forward to Amped Up, and we'll go ahead and include a link to that in the show notes as well.
Right. And, hopefully with our little community where we're hearing from a lot of these lawyers that we're talking about that are out there just leading the charge and going to the, courtrooms and the Capitol halls and fighting for us, are providing some of that experience to the rest of people who want to come to our website, read the interviews for free, and they can nominate themselves for an interview and share information with the rest of our membership as well.
Yeah. Mike, good podcasts. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Dad. See you, bud.
That wraps another episode of the official Lawyer Minds podcast. Please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Explore the other content Lawyer Minds has to offer, and engage with us on social media. Your feedback on the show and ideas for future shows is always welcomed. See you next time.